Hey, kindergarten through third grade. Today we are going to do Cubism squirrels for week 24 art. Before we get started, I want you to go ahead and grab some colored pencils or crayons, whatever you have at your house. You're going to need a pair of scissors, a ruler, and a glue stick. And our Cubism squirrels, we're going to cut them up, paste them on a dark sheet of cardstock, which I sent home with you. You'll have this geometric sheet of paper and then your dark cardstock. So go ahead and gather all of those supplies and then come back and we will get started with our Cubism squirrels. All right, so starting with your solid white piece of paper that you have, or white cardstock. Parents, if you are downloading and printing these supplies, these items, if you do have cardstock, it's going to work better for you to use that instead of just regular paper. It's going to give it a little bit more stability when you're gluing everything together. And then if you don't have a dark sheet of dark cardstock, just whatever kind of dark paper that you may have, or paper that they can paint and color over, giving it a nice solid dark color is going to help present and showcase what they're going to do with their cubism here. So with cubism, the concept is that they take something that is identifiable, something like a squirrel, and they're going to give it all of these very jagged lines. I'm going to show you what this image actually looks like all together. These very jagged lines, straight and geometric shapes to make that squirrel look a little bit more sharp. Now, with Cubism, what they like to do is have one color kind of fade across, stretch across all of these different shapes. So I broke this squirrel apart and put him on here. Now with your students, depending on what age level they are, just have them start coloring in these different shapes. So for like kindergarten and first grade, this fading from one color to the next can look just like taking one solid color and darkening it on one side and have them stretch that color across to the other side. And they can go over this in some layers so that there's actually a change in what we call value, which is one of our elements of art. It's the light to dark of an object. So it's a change in value coming from dark, fading across that shape to light. Something like that is what I want you to try to have your students do. Now, as your students are older, going into like third grade, I would love to see them kind of actually blend and mix some colors together, like what you see here, where it is essentially the same color. It's all green, but it's fading from a really bright yellowy green to a really dark turquoisey forest green. And you can do something like that by just getting three colors that are just kind of fading from one to the other. Start with the light color and have them lay that color down across part of the shape, letting it fade up as it's going across, something like that. Then take your mid-tone, starting at the other end, and letting that be darker on one side, fading across towards the light. And then finally, by adding in that super dark color, and it's not going to have to stretch as far, it's only going to be just at the one end. So I mean, a general rule of thumb, if you take that space that you're coloring and you think of it in thirds, you're going to have that light color stretch almost the full 2/3, or a little past the full 2/3, and that dark color is just going to come up a little bit, and then that mid-tone is going to bridge the gap between those two. So doing something like that will kind of help them practice their color layering, which we've talked about in class, and their blending of their colors. So you can kind of help them decide which one is where they would be with all that. Now, if all you have is crayons at home, go ahead and use those as well. And you don't have to worry about being too careful with these lines. If your student wants to kind of color outside of the lines, oh, that one's broken, bummer. If they want to color outside of the lines a bit, they don't need to be too careful about that because this is all going to get cut off. All right, I'm going to use the other end. There we go. So they can just have that color fade across and they can go outside of the lines, and that's going to be fine because this is all going to get trimmed. Okay, so as we go into our trimming, this is one that my Claire did for me. You can have these, again, depending on your student's grade level and where they're at, you can kind of just pre-cut these a little bit for them so that it's a little bit easier for them to get around those shapes, and then they can come in and trim that up a little bit closer. So this is really good practice for those fine motor skills, getting those really nice crisp edges, you know, just practicing all of that laying out of these items. Once you have these all trimmed out, what you're going to do is just lay these pieces down on top of your dark cardstock, and it's almost going to be like a puzzle to find their layout. There's only 5 pieces, so laying your cardstock down, landscape, then you can put on the squirrel's tail. You can get the squirrel's body, and you're going to have a little bit of a disconnect between all of these shapes, and that's just going to kind of help build that outlining of your squirrel. And you can always cheat by looking at the original, which I'm going to send in like a download copy for you so you can see, okay, which direction is that squirrel's body going on. So you can like sneak a peek at that and then lay that down and know exactly where that's going to go. Okay, so this one would be the tail, the body. Right here, this piece is going to be the arm. I'll lay that out real quick for you. And see how that just fits in there. And then you also have, these are the front legs. This little back piece back here, that is going to be the back arms on the back side of the squirrel. And then this is the squirrel's face. Now I left all of these kind of together because these pieces got a whole lot smaller. If your student did want to cut them all apart, they can, but it's going to make those pieces a whole lot harder to assemble. So after they get them all laid out, then they will come up with something that looks like this, where you have these little gaps in between your tile pieces of this cube squirrel, and you can glue them down, use a glue stick. If you do have liquid glue, the paper will warp, so glue it down and then put a heavy book on top of it so that it stays nice and flat as it's drying. Now that very last step is to take a ruler and measure in on either side of your paper, like 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch, and go all the way around. And doing this with your student, I find that a lot of these students, this is a really great practice for them to learn how to measure and mark, and then to be able to connect those lines of measurement that they do coming in 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch all the way around, so that they can get this nice, clean, smooth line that they can do with a pencil. So because the cardstock is dark, use a light colored pencil or a light crayon like white, and they can just go around and create a frame now for their composition so that it looks a whole lot more polished and complete. And then at the very top, if you leave a little bit of a gap, that's a perfect place for them to just put their autograph and sign it to show off their creation. And this one is Amelia's, my 3rd graders. So you can see her name right there in the middle. She got to practice her cursive, which she's super proud of. And she did actually a double line with the dark and the light pink all the way around. And I have one more. This one was just showing if you cut every single piece apart, how that would all lay in, which was, a lot more time consuming. But if your student wanted to do that, go ahead and do that and try piecing all of those together. So you get a little bit of the benefit of the puzzle, the cubism, where you're stretching that color across the shape, letting it fade from one color to the next. And then all of those geometric shapes. So, all right, once you're done, take pictures of it. I would love to see your final work, and you can send them to me. You can post them on Facebook so that you can show your friends as well. I will see you guys next week for week 25. We'll see what we come up with for that week. Bye.